average Jadani only lives to 110. In that time, I experienced the Council's first contact with over a dozen different species. Vintaru, so many others. However, the most notable by far was, obviously, humanity. First contact with them was interesting, yet at the same time, mundane. A Kenar freighter had become critically damaged due to a pirate attack. Despite the risk, the captain ordered an FTL course to the nearest known inhabited system. Due to the damage, their drive eventually failed. They dropped out of warp and were left drifting just within the orbit of the dwarf planet we later come to find out was called Pluto. While they tried to repair their drive, their remaining operational being completely defenseless and not knowing which species the ships belonged, broadcast to binary. It had become the most basic form of communication. It seemed, though once first basic was heavily encouraged, though not required. It was believed even except to surrender, since a ship not destroyed was a ship worth salvage, loot, and possibly ransom for its crew. Plus, you could always blow it up later after taking everything of value. To their surprise, the ships stopped almost immediately. They sat unmoving for what seemed like an eternity, their sublight engines idling and their primary weapon system ready but untargeted. Two of the ships were different in that they had no detectable weapons of any kind. The Kenar were then even more surprised when their sensors told them were pow and their array received a return message in binary. It read,
"Your ship seems crippled. Do you require assistance?"
That was the first interaction sea and humanity. The two ships without weapons were a ship dedicated solely to repairing other ships and what the humans call a hospital ship, or a vessel whose primary purpose was to render longer-term medical aid than what might be capable in a ship's sickbay, and thus carried no weapons as a sign of its non-combatant status. After the freighter was repaired, the Kenar and humans exchanged the things typical of species who experience peaceful first contact. Information about each other, what they knew of the wider galaxy, more sophisticated ways of communicating, cultural exchanges. Overall, it was a pleasant, if unremarkable, first contact. Soon, human dignitaries met with the wider council. They seemed like most other peaceable species, amicable, eager to learn about the species of the council, open to diplomacy. Their initial approach to the Kenar vessel with weapons ready was understandable, and wasn't taken as a sign they would be one of the more warlike species, like the Ned-tier, Ikar, or Ayarkan. They were encountering an unknown alien people for the first time, and had to be ready for anything. To investigate the unknown intruders, but also aid vessels, despite not knowing the intentions of the ship. After much discussion, debate, and negotiation, they were offered membership for galaxy. Human system, quick commerce, and industry. They had a knack for making friends, trading, and building. They were always willing to make compromises, and it served them well. They also had an explorative spirit that caused them to expand rapidly. They were lucky in that virtually all of the systems in what they called the local bubble, a region roughly 300 light years in diameter, centered around their sister star, were not claimed by any other species, and so they were able to rapidly expand, and before long, they had claimed the region for themselves. Their direct control was felt on over 300 planets and tens of thousands of asteroids, albeit the vast majority of them were simple mining, trade, and well as decently sized financial aid. Time-filled terrorists took a human city on the planet, threatening a return for the terror. Another Kirill terrorist cell. Action of humanity had been less than pleasant. To many, the humans seemed to be in a tricky spot. They had 50 million people with a nuclear gun to their heads, and their only two options seemed to be to try and free them with direct military action that might result in nuclear annihilation, or try and negotiate the release of terrorists from a species they hadn't had much cordial interaction with, which would set a dangerous precedent. To most people's surprise, the humans poured all of their charisma and negotiating skills into convincing the media to give them the people the terrorists wanted. They managed it, but at a heavy cost. Over 5 trillion galactic monetary units worth of resources, discounts, and direct financial aid. In the end, they were able to satisfy the terrorists and regain control of the city. It was not a complete disaster. The humans were able to track most of the terrorists' ships as they left the system, and with the aid of the Carol, Melia, and a couple of the other species, most of the terrorists were recaptured or killed. But the thing most species took note of from these incidents was the length their military in topic many at the time didn't think of when discussing humans. Their military. They had, of course, undergone various exchanges of military-related technology and such, but it had never seemed like their strong suit. They were as competent at fighting as most were, and their equipment was even considered largely inferior due to the fact that their weapons were mostly still ballistics-based, using chemical propellants to accelerate bits of metal. The main exception was their warships, which used a combination of railguns and missiles. Overall, fighting a bit like the Icar I mentioned before, decided they wanted to make humanity subservient to them. Like they had several species, humans would be over really quickly. Seemed they just didn't have the capacity to fight a multi gods. I wish they had never needed to be proven wrong. The shattering of the galactic-wide illusion that humanity were pushovers ended a mere 5 years after the terrorist incident on Ava. The humans shared a border with the Hadzai, the largest of the warlike species in the UG. The humans. 2 arms, 2 legs, average height of about 6 Earth feet, average weight of 200 Earth pounds. Though they did have much thicker hair on their arms and legs than humans due to their planet being slightly colder on average than Earth. Human relate both hot. I didn't much care about humanity one way or another. As they became the mercantile powerhouse they were largely known as at the time, relations warmed up as human goods started entering the Hadzai economy. But once human control had expanded to their borders, they became increasingly hostile to humanity. The Hadzai had grown used to controlling the largest amount of territory of any UGC species, but it seemed they were growing worried about no longer being, as the humans would say, the biggest fish in the pond. Humanity tried its usual tactics of generosity, but no matter how much the higher cluster as Hyades. Hyades contained over a third of humanity's habitable worlds and produced the majority of their thallium, gallium, and thorium. When their own charisma failed, grown fond of the humans, as many of my people had, and made the point to become good friends with every human ambassador that had come along. During this crisis, the human ambassador was a female named Alexandra Hansen. She was the youngest human ambassador so far, having been assigned human years old, though she was now 35. I must admit I did find myself fancying her more than I did most human females. Something about her I found very attractive. Something aside from her physical appearance, which was already very easy on the eyes. We're still not quite sure why, but Jadani and humans and had children. Probably helped that we look almost identical to humans, aside from our skin coming in many more colors. For example, my skin is a light red. I'm told humans call it coral red. Anyhow, I also must confess that I had considered possibly trying to take my friendship with Alexandra, or Allie to her friends, further, but after much consideration. I decided that since it would basically force us out of our jobs for obvious reasons, it was best to leave things at a very friendly, though professional level. Not to mention I was twice her age, which, while not an uncommon thing for Jadani, was a generally frowned upon thing by humans. Anyway, when Allie had come to me while preparations for the arbitration were underway, she knew that I was part of the committee that dealt with it as such, coming to me mere hours much like it was when I saw the look on her face that I knew why she had come.
With me, Ambassador Gara.
I chuckled, so formal.
Please, Ellie, you know you can just call me Genta.
I was going even if only for a moment.
I know, just the force of habit, I guess. You know, I always stay formal when I'm meeting others as a human ambassador, so I get used to it. And I guess you know why.
Yes. About the arm, though I am curious of being seen by come to town.
I sighed as she sat down and reached for the bottle around. Just full of something the humans called Jack Daniels. She poured herself an ounce or so before gulping it down and pouring a full drink.
It is a definite. In fact, I'm really not even here in. It's just here human who is scared for what the future holds.
I was trying some strange psychological tactic for some reason. In our time as friends, I had never seen her. Even as ambassador for a few months, she showed both the public and me nothing but cool and calm. Then again, I also suppose I could see how this crisis far dwarfed that of one that concerned only a single city. I thought that perhaps those that believed humanity was weak were right, and she was worried that if things didn't go humanity's way, it would be the start of their subjugation. I carefully thought my words over before speaking.
Ali, if you're worried that the Hadzai might prevail in the arbitration and use it as a stepping stone to a full annexation, I that the Jadani
cut me off with a shake of her head.
No, my friend, it's not that I'm worried about. No, I'm here because I'm worried that the reason for more to this problem, that they'll force our hand.
I was now thoroughly puzzled.
What do you mean by force your hand?
Allie chuckled before taking it.
Genta, I and the rest of my race are well aware of the rest of the galaxy's view on humanity. That we're weak and I can assure you.
knows, it's better to be prepared than caught with your dick in the wind. That's but anyhow, we were the E.N.S. Beth McClellan, one of our small fleet of stealth frigates, and departed for Nadar, the Hadzai home system. The ride there was quiet. We busied ourselves with double, triple, and quadruple checking our gear. MVGs, PS systems, nav computers, weapons. I think I cleaned my M51 5 times. Oh, you might not recognize that name. It's an integrally suppressed assault rifle firing the subsonic 9x 39 mm round. Detachable mags between 10 and 30 rounds, 800 RPM fire rate, as quiet as a whisper, hard hitting as a truck, and more durable than a Jadani hooker. Not sure if that last part will make it in, but whatever. About an hour before our machine gunner, we'll just call him Mo, came to me for a while about the middle small talk before he asked me a question that I was expecting sooner or later.
Honcho, you really think we'll be needed?
He asked. I let out a breathless sigh and replied,
Sure not.
War's nothing but a lot of suffering for what could be worked out together, but if we are, then so be it. We've offered so much yet they refuse to cooperate. If they want to fuck around and find out, we'll oblige them. Flying. We fist bumped as Alexandra Hanson's in the speech. Humanity would histories and just work together, maybe even better off. Yet at the same time, we crave it. Conflict, I mean. Every bullet that's been shot, every bomb that's been dropped, every nuke that's been launched has been due to that craving. Unity. To build for ourselves a grand civilization where all needs are met and all wants can be satisfied. Nonviolence is also in the human soul. That's the human condition. At the same time, father, but few talent. Seriously, we still have it then. We pulled too hard, and when we were like a loaded spring, and it cost us and the Hadzai more than anyone could have ever realized. Sorry, I'm rambling again. There's been enough talk of that stuff during and after the war that I'm sure everyone is plenty sick of it by now and just want me to get to the killing part. My point is, while us in the military are happy that the human is just a bit more intense for us. A weird combination of being desperate for us to not be needed yet also aching for the chance to kill. That's why I say Mo's range. It showed both a desire for peace to continue and the urge to see what a Hadzai looked like after having a frag grenade go off their feet. Before I knew it, we made our system stealth system amount of the long time, but the amount of energy releasing and after a warp jump was just too much, too quickly. So we dropped out of FTL, well outside of the system before, venting as much of our emissions as we could, and going cold. It took another couple of hours to arrive in orbit over the gas out of sight of its two moons and the outpost on it. Without being able to physically see us, there was no way the Hadzai would know we were there. They still technically could. There's no way to stay hidden from all possible viewing angles out unless you fly into the atmosphere of a gas giant, which isn't possible while stealth. But the risk of being visually seen from anywhere but Kai's two moons was deemed negligible. The cyber division got what thing order would come. That was thanks to our high security clearance came and had timed things out. The first shots were being fired, we'd be going in. Now the question I'm sure you're asking is, how did we know when the order was given? Well, the answer to that is hiding in plain sight. The speech. Yep, that was it. Direct communication with command was impossible since a Hadzai convoy would give it not been time to fit a warp communicator to the McClellan, not to mention how expensive those things are. But by linking the go order to the speech, all we needed to do was passively piggyback on the Hadzai's signals. Yeah, we as most everyone else. Only difference was started listening. Well, started moving, so did we. Gear was loaded. Final, once out of the suck, forgotten someone's NVGs or something. We were just arriving in orbit of Haima when we loaded into the shuttle, which I don't also involve the frigates, and where cargo lives, 1,000 feet altitude. We tuned back in using our helmets just to make sure that order didn't come. Didn't want to end up landing on Hima, and it turned out something changed without us being told. The UEE military is the best in the galaxy, but no sentient creature yet created is completely infallible. Screw-ups have, do, and will just that. Sure enough, coming up on it, when that cry from the rear loading ramp and into Hama's atmosphere. Yeah, it was overdramatic, the line I mean, but hey, humans. Anyway, it was night at the Capitol, so we made sure our NVGs were on. Thankfully, the Hadzai breathe almost the same atmo we do, save for having very slightly less oxygen and having different trace elements. So all the extra gear we needed to make a jump from 40,000 feet was an oxygen tank that we carried on our backs that was hooked into our face masks. Thank God for that, because we already had enough stuff strapped to us. Our weapons, ammo, NVGs, the PS system, not to mention the heating system in that to keep us spread out like every practice jump we'd ever done, simulated or otherwise. Once at the proper altitude, we popped our chutes. Our infill point was a section of one of the outer walls. We'd seen that only one guard would patrol it every few hours, and he just made his round when we boarded the shuttle. It was a hard target, only about 6 feet wide and with 2 giant towers on either end. But thanks to the nav system in our visors, we were given the perfect flight path to follow, so we'd land along its length without hitting a tower. I hit kind of hard, but nothing I wasn't used to. Mo and the other members of my team, Doc and coming in and walking to a stop, like walking down a flight of stairs. Overachiever. Once down, we ditched the oxygen tank. We'd be leaving you couldn't mark ready our PS tower in front of us, which led deeper into the palace. We knew exactly where the family would be. The main dining hall, eating dinner, and probably in the middle of shitting themselves after watching the speech. The first strike target gets onto the walls, and we had plenty of many have the list of first strike. The answer is quite smart looking at ships and gigs. All targets on that list are directly related to the Hudson at the time, the Hadzai had a strange system wherein the people that manned factories and mines were considered part of the military. We didn't understand why. We guessed some form of nationalization, but here when those factories are hellfire. While we obviously also looked to take out the royal family, nuking a city of tens of millions to get a couple dozen people wasn't worth it, and even an orbital strike would produce too much collateral damage. We needed precision. We needed my team. In any case, we moved through the royal palace, rapidly clearing hallways and rooms of the essence. While according to our surveillance, there would be few guards between our entry point and the dining hall, but few is not none. A couple we entered, and we opened the door expecting to find a pair of guards walking in the direction away from. Every previous security feeds at this time. Instead, the door opened to both of them, standing just on the other side, mid-stride, and reaching for the door. Guess they forgot something or whatever. Their eyes had barely before Maze and I jammed our combat knives into their eye sockets. We dragged the bodies to the side and over hidden was clear to open the door to the hallway bedroom. The door behind us opened. Spinning around, weapons ready, we saw something, or rather someone, we had not been expecting. Martau E.R., daughter of Ambassador E.R., cousin of the Emperor, doorway, eyes as wide as the must have been quite all dressed up in arm. We hadn't seen her on the security cams because, as we found out later, she had just arrived to visit her relative. No plans with the always case. I had about 3 seconds to make it. 1 second. The first thought was to let her go. In human terms, she was barely a teenager and wouldn't pose us a direct threat. Stupid. The moment she was out of sight, howling about intruders. 2 seconds. We could just kill her. And all but that, we were not killing a teenage girl, enemy or not, just because she had the misfortune of going to the bathroom at the wrong time. There'd be plenty of wrong place, wrong time, deaths to come. And sadly, many of them would probably be civilians, but if my team could help it, it was not going to happen. And while she technically was a part of the royal family, we were going for the nucleus of the family, not its periphery. 3 seconds. She was also just far enough from us that had we lunged for her, she'd be able to turn and run down the hall behind her, and a wild chase would only drastically increase our chances of being more quickly detected. Time's up. Before I could make the decision, Maze made it for me. She threw her M51 at her. Martau caught it, but it gave the precious couple of seconds of distraction for Maze to also cross the distance and punch the poor girl right in the face. That knocked her out cold. Maze caught her as she fell and propped her against the wall before retrieving her rifle. We moved on. The next hallway was to open the door. We saw the 2 Hadzai guards outside of the, apparently unperturbed about the disturbance that just happened. Their mistake. Before they could do anything, Maze and I hit them each. 3 to on the other side of the door they were guarding. There was no need to hide the bodies. The fun would kick off soon enough. blankets over her front of her helmet to keep it in place before grabbing 2 flashbangs from her chest rig and pulling the pins, but keeping the spoons depressed. I opened the door. Me and the rest of the team, staying out of sight behind it, and the noise of the Hadzai royal antically to each other filtered into the hallway. From what I could tell, they were doing just what I thought they would be, shitting themselves at the typhoon. Maze took a step in and rolled her flashbangs into the room, trying to get them about 1/3 and 2/3 the way in, so as to cover as much of the room as possible. Just as I closed the door again, one of the Hadzai guards, somehow, heard the sound of them rolling on the floor, noticed the open door, and made some kind of noise of curiosity. The door shut and the flashbangs went off, ripped the blanket off around. I stormed inside. Guards from the shop. They never had the chance to see us. There were 13 family members in the room. His wife's sister, 2 aunts, and his. The only people missing were his 2 daughters and his 3rd aunt, who was on the other side of the planet. In recent death of plenty more of that would be happening real soon. There were also 8 guards, 2 at our door, as well as the other 2 doors in the room, and 2 more standing at the far end of the room, 1 at each corner. Just not much to describe here. We just cleared the room. It was over. None of them were able to overcome the shock to react to us, so describing to you as we aimed our weapons and pulled the trigger would be redundant. Now you may ask why we spared Marteau, but not the Emperor's sons. Well, come of age, and should everyone die, one of them would be next in line for his daughter. They just, and since females from taking up the throne anyway, it wasn't seen as necessary to take extra effort to eliminate them. Plus, as I've stated before, killing the entire family or preventing a new emperor from being crowned wasn't the goal. Intimidation was. Once we were finished, we replaced our now empty magazines, turned and ran. We knew it wouldn't be very long before 2 guards were supposed to come and check on the family, where they would find the bodies, and we needed to get out of there before then. CQC better to we sprint Maze had you left, so couldn't let them fall into enemy hands. I got on the radio and called up to the shuttle that was still hovering where we jumped from it at 40,000 feet.
Fly, this is Cyanide. Mission complete. Require exfil. Over.
Seconds it took for the pilot to... Roger, Cyanide. ETA 5. Exfil was in the courtyard, and the quickest way there was actually back the way we'd come, through the tower, and down through the one that had been behind us when we landed. It back to the next to last tower before all hell broke loose. Alarms went off, and we could hear the echoes of guards as they howled, both in mourning and anger for the royal family's deaths. We just kept on moving. When we got outside on the wall, the palace had become completely illuminated by lights, with a few floodlights filling the courtyard. Heard a suppressed M89 marksman, Rifle 51, settling out the lights. Time for stealth was likely over, but if we could still somehow get out without, we'd take it. We entered the tower and started bounding down the stairs. Before we could get to the ground floor, however, the door that led in from the courtyard opened, and looking down, we could see a small stream of 8 Hadzai coming up the stairs, likely to secure this section of the walls. With only 4 minutes, continued stealth was now definitely a no-go, as there was no time for fancy tactics or a different route. Mo took point and we continued rapidly descending the stairs. When the lead Hadzai and Mo came face to face, react as Mo laid into them. Machine gun at the time, fitted with sonic ammo, scoring 7.62x37 was quiet. As he opened, me and Maze leaned over the railing and unleashed a hail of fire on the Hadzai, lower down the stairs and behind the leaders. We took them all to get a shot. We finished getting down the Mount onto the first humans to set foot on. Actual Hadzai soil, but we didn't really care at that point. I glanced at the time on my visor hoodie and saw that the shuttle should be landing in a minute. The place we had chosen was on the other side. No cover between there and where it seemed like I knew where we were. My attention watching for any movement and the clock on. 25 passed. Some of the shuttle started to fill with our ride here. I wondered why there were no Hill had surely been headed. I got my hand on the shuttle, which was just starting to descend into the water. They were in a moment by the sound of dozens firing at the shuttle. But stunning, we that every if we could kill the knobs and their fire. Thank God we shield because when the shield was hit, it would flare blue. Why blue? I don't know. Regardless, as we ran from a distance, it would have looked like 4 blue balls surrounded by a small dust cloud moving along the ground, getting hit, and how many shots were missing and getting to the end credit. It threw it all. We finally got to the shuttle to it. While Doc back off, I ran through a window. Without shuttle 1X, the M2 variant to be precise, the one meant for combat use. Armor. Since they couldn't produce the any needed and were eventually upsized versions of the introduced. Even with just armor, though, it'd take more firepower than what semi-auto handheld accelerators, even 2 or 3 dozen, could put out in a short time. So, of course, they brought more firepower. As we started to clear the walls and the shuttle started forward, I watched as the top of the towers started to slide away and reveal the much larger anti-aircraft infantry's mass accelerator. Our stealth system had shielded the shuttle from detection while it was at altitude and would prevent targeting system just wild as all but one still struck us right in the rear ramp. It passed clean through the ramp. They were still shooting, and some were close, but we didn't get hit again. Now, however, we had a problem. The shuttle was no longer space or even high altitude capable. However, I was unaware that the Navy had thought of issues like this, though I don't know why. Seems like such an obvious thing to think about. Maybe the heat of the moment clouded my thinking. After setting a course to the frigate waiting in orbit, the pilot got out of his seat and came back to us. He politely asked us, "Get the fuck out of the way." When we did so, he retrieved and a couple of steel plates from a container bolted to the floor. Going over to the hole in the ramp, he placed one of the plates over the holes, grabbed a flat plate for the hole in the room. When he was done, he returned and walked past us. Muttering and Neanderthals. We all looked at each other and just erupted over his shuttle getting damaged while getting us out. The situation. We took our seats and just tried to let our bodies. Our mission was none of the team. I've heard either talk about how the royal family could so easily be killed in their own fortress, or about how they could have done better defending it. But honestly, I credit patrolling the palace. The guard routes and schedule were tight, and there was virtually no way for us to have gotten in and out without being noticed at some point. I don't think even he could have done tools and knowledge the Hadzai had at the time. If it intel there were about loss and expended. When we arrived at the taken into the car base, no need to repeat to. Once back in the Sol system, we were quickly debriefed at Pythia Station on Pluto. When that was done, we were immediately assigned a new mission, and were told we'd be working in tandem with 3 other 4-person teams. Our interest was assembled, so the mission must have either they were expecting heavy resistance, but whatever the mission was, we would be ready. I am Karan Yar, and I am the former fleet commander of the Nadar sector. Yes, for the battle, most Hadzai call Yar's father. I, however, need to remind anyone reading this that this name for the battle is a post-war creation. We were full of System 6HU by our people and the Battle of Earth by the humans. I had little reason to believe what I did would result in anything but victory. I made a see that fervor in attending to the royal before we had found their abomination stuck all of us hard. Everyone looked at them. They were the soul of a. There was not a Hadzai alive I can think of that would have refused a request from them. We believed that without them, we would no longer have it. Now, they were gone. The new emperor would be crowned eventually. There were still distant male cousins. Never be the community messages coming and going from everybody knew what exactly we were to do. To describe how the Empire worked, I'll use human terms as they are more widely understood now. Sadly, few would understand I used Hadzai. Officially, the Empire was a unitary parliamentarian military dictatorship. The Emperor technically held ultimate power, but through centuries of slowly acquired tradition, that control was rarely exercised anymore, and he had delegated much of his power to his inferiors. That led to a series of other technicalities. To put it as simply as I can, with the Emperor withholding the use of his power except on rare occasions, the tribes were supposed to be the leaders of the Hadzai Empire in the Emperor's stead, but the military hierarchy held de facto power. The tribes had been reduced to a rubber stamp. They were the voice of the Empire, but the words spoken were the hierarchies. The closest government I've found that would be comparable is the government of the 20th century human nation called the Empire of Japan. Thus, with the military hierarchy practically obliterated and the royal family so thoroughly and ruthless slaughtered, the empire was most certainly leaderless. Both tribes, the tribe of commoners and tribe of elites, had mostly assaulted. However, so long as a single male member of the royal family or a member of the military hierarchy survived, no Hadzai could ever consider them our leaders. The problem was figuring out which members of the hierarchy were still alive, and of them, who would have the authority and ability to lead our people. I'm sure this confusion in the previous section said, being allowed so far was a requirement of my participation, but either he was lied to or just what he's talking about. Humans knew exactly with everything in disarray. The only thing I wish back. I felt that the lower our chances of dealing with whatever the humans had planned next. The best way, in my view, to beat their next move was to strike them before they could make it. A preemptive attack of our own, if you will. To shift the initiative to us, and I had a perfect idea of exactly where and what we should attack. From what I could tell from the verifiable barrage of messages we'd received, nobody above the rank of fleet commander had survived. Or if they had not been heard from yet. So I decided to act. I put out a message into the swamp the net had become and hoped others would heed it. I informed everyone that I was taking command of the fleet and ordered all could make the journey with all possible speed as we would world. Sounds unrealistic, but I had no time to spare. The next human attack could happen at any moment. The plan was to gather all the ships I could, take out the guards, and the place of their most revered leader, while also depriving them of their best shipyards. An eye for an eye. However, as soon as I sent my message out, another message was put out by Fleet Commander Kin Baron of the Natara sector. This one was directly in opposition to mine. It ordered the fleet to disregard me and to hold their positions until things could be sorted out. This started a back-and-forth debate. As it intensified, things on the net calmed down. It seemed everyone decided to wait and see who'd come out dominant. I argued what I've stated previously, that we needed to strike back and take the initiative from the humans. He argued that it was exactly what the humans were expecting, that they were ocean to the wind and come charging at them blindly. I know that now. With the war behind us, right. I'm a teller, and according to the information I had at the time, my plan stood a perfectly reasonable chance of succeeding. More than reasonable, really. Estimates showed that in 3 days, we could have nearly 2.5 sectors worth of ships ready to attack. With that many ships, any commander should have believed they would be able to overcome a single system's fleet. As the UEE's home fleet had. We could beat them. I knew it. It was obvious. However, as I said, I will not apologize for my actions, but I will admit I wish I had waited just a day longer. Eventually, both me and Carverin realized the other could not be convinced. We left it up to everyone else. Whoever wanted to join whichever side could do so. With the hierarchy in its current state, technically have the legal authority to give orders to anyone outside of our respective fleets, yet so the decision would have to be left up to them. As doubled to just under 2-sector fleets. The core was my own sector fleet, which was down to about 70% of its full strength, thanks to the surprise attack. The rest was made up of ships from every other sector fleet. Destroyers from Imp Bin, Arbor, and Gus. This is our sector fleet since the sector. Beyond that, we're only there because they had time. I put out the call for whatever reason. I contemplated waiting an extra day, but decided to stick to my plan. Once time was up and the ships were ready, we set a course for Earth and left to extract revenge. When we arrived over Earth half a day later, we were met in orbit by nearly the entire UEE home fleet. I was stunned. I had expected some ships, but not nearly the entire fleet. How could they have possibly its heading in the disruptive space-time it leaves behind human? Their stealth ships, particularly the one that had destroyed the Hidek mine. It had remained in the Nadar system watching us. If that was the case, then that also meant that human ships were faster than ours, almost mind-bogglingly so. When we'd left, our intelligence had indicated that the UEE home fleet was still largely at dock at Mars and Earth. For them to have seen us leave, gotten to Earth ahead of us, and for the fleet to have organized so quickly, they would have had to have arrived less than a couple hours after leaving. It had also meant that the UEE had known we'd come and kept their ships on high alert, ready to deploy on a moment's notice. I had expected the latter. They had clearly been preparing for war for a while, but never considered they could by full relations them by before assigned a couple dreadnoughts with a few cruisers and a destroyer escort to attack the Philadelphia naval yards, while the rest of the fleet of Cairo, where the tomb of Cyrus was located. When I gave the order, battle commenced. Human rail guns, which were more powerful guns, close combat, and could easily punch holes in anything smaller than a dreadnought. To do so, however, they had to disable our shield. Hordes of humans of the Harbin and Jannerus dreadnought groups pushed into the it was of missiles that Our PDGs, the only chemically propelled ballistic weapon we employed by this time, were doing their best, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. I broke off several cruiser wings to try and flank the humans from below, but not by much. It wasn't long before ships started to lose their fire from all sides. Dreadnought, native human captain, powered down their leg, and with their shields gone, fired his spinal railgun and destroyed them. The humans weren't coming out unscathed, though. 4 of our cruisers surrounded a human dreadnought, the ENS Bahar, and pummeled its shields with hordes of unguided torpedoes. Our ships were designed for very close quarters fighting, and so we had deemed the guidance system unnecessary. Once its shields were gone, a mass of coil gun rounds forced their way through its armor and into its reactor. Overall, the battle was tough, but we were making headway. The UEE ships, through some very sophisticated maneuvering, managed to stay in front of us and continued to try and stop our attack, but were very much on the back foot. Our ferocious fighting was becoming too much for them. Over at the naval yards, our task force had managed to take out the small number of UEE cruisers and frigates defending them, and were now pounding the but Chicago and the naval yards were nearing destruction. Our and captains began to prepare their coil guns for orbit to surface fire, despite the remains of the UEE home fleet still engaging them in desperate battles for winning the day. In an instant, everything changed. Warning, multiple warp signatures detected. Those words will forever haunt me. We were so close, and yet victory was ripped from our grasp. From above us, hundreds of ships of the human Fifth Fleet warped in, drove straight down, and like a spear, stabbed right through the heart of our formation. And dozens upon dozens lost their tsunami and were subsequently riddled with railgun slugs, many shots finding their target of our reactors. To be veterans' recollection of seeing this counterattack. Then the Fifth Fleet appeared above the Hudsai fleet and dove in on them like the cavalry charging to the attack. They clashed, and within minutes, the Hudsai crumbled like a... Within a very short span of time, what had been the makings of a great victory had been turned into an incredibly... It was quite clear. And to be outly surrounded ships, but I knew and gave the order to retreat. I sat in my command chair and started to put my head into my hands in mourning for our defeat when my navigator informed me that the warp drive wouldn't engage. I snapped back to attention and asked him why. When the remnants of the fleet had managed, if I couldn't follow them, at least they could get back and tell Kinvaran of what happened. I became enveloped by fear, surprise, and confusion when the fleet also could not seemingly engage their warp drives. Left with no other options, I must stress that point, I ordered our remaining ships to cease fire. Some since the war have tried to claim as an act of cowardice, though I was willing to die to avenge the Emperor. I did not consider it cowardice to surrender. Fighting would not achieve anything to further that goal and would only lead to our deaths. Perhaps if we surrendered, they may keep us prisoners somewhere we could escape and maybe find some way to hinder their plans. It didn't happen, but I believed it was a possibility at the time. Our ships obliged my command, though I would find out shortly that many wanted to find or I had some master our predicament or turn the tables in our favor. how they thought I would accomplish such a feat when we were outnumbered more than 10 to 1, and all of our ships were damaged in some way, many heavily. So I do not know. I have spent the years since the war consulting with every expert on warfare that will speak with me, humans obviously included. I could have done different. What has always been a resounding no. To my relief, the humans returned the favor and ceased fire as well, though sensors showed they were still very much ready to blast us into pieces. A request for communication was pinged to us, and I answered it. Due to a word how the discussion went, Guerra has asked that I do so in the interest of a more complete record. Worst moment in my life, but I shall, while also relating to you how I felt and what I thought at the time.
Fleet Commander Yar.
A human male voice boomed through the bridge.
No shape to fight. I'm assuming your cessation of fire means you intend to surrender.
Before he could continue, I interrupted him.
Before I give my answer, knowing
his reply was very off. But humans would speak very formal as this one, but his reply was so casual, vulgar, and sarcastic, it very much caught me off guard.
Sure you can. My name's your daddy, and I'm the one who just spanked you for being a naughty boy.
I could hear the laughter and snickers of his bridge crew on the other end. I was so confused by his answer that I could not reply, and when I didn't, he continued after the laughter had died off.
Jokes aside, I am Admiral Daniel Wilters of the UE. Wish to surrender. Violated. You have 10.
My bridge crew looked to me, but I could not look them in the eyes as I replied.
My fleet is at your mercy, Admiral.
He snorted, as if he was irritated.
I know it is Commander Yar. That's not what I asked.
I realized what he had wanted me to do. He wanted me to actually say the words. I was in no mood for games, so I obliged him.
Yes, I'm surrendering myself and my fleet.
We were talking via audio communication, so I could not see him, but I knew he had to be smiling as he spoke.
Roger that, Commander. Power down your reactors, drop your shields, and prepare to be boarded. We are watching you intently. If you try anything, and I mean anything, my fleet will turn yours into twisted scrap metal.
I turned to my comms officer and told them to relay the message. He wanted to protest, but didn't. Once the message had been relayed and followed, we waited in near silence. While our main reactor was off and the larger backups were as well, a small auxiliary one remained on to provide life support in critical systems like sensors and communications. Thanks to those sensors, we watched as one by one our ships powered down, except for 6 of them, 2 of which were some of our remaining dreadnoughts. I demanded an answer for why they weren't following orders. The reply was simple, and one I guess I wasn't surprised by.
For the Emperor.
They surged forward and opened fire with whatever weapons they had left at anything they thought they could hit. Position. They railed blotted out the sun together. Once they were gone, weapons asked, once again showing that they didn't merely murder the royal family for intimidation, no matter what that honcho man claims. They knew it had been large personnel to accept my surrender. A few of my ship's crew tried to resist being taken, but were either subdued or, in the case of violent resistors, shot. Is that word even applies? While I didn't appreciate it, I have to admit, it was justified self-defense. We'd have done operate what Admiral Wilters. Before the evacuation was complete, strange readings started to come in from our remaining dreadnought. We quickly realized what they had done. Had managed to drift close to a group of human cruisers and their dreadnought leader. Then they restarted their reactor, but had gone about it the wrong way, and it was now set to overload in less than a minute. Wilters didn't need to relay this to his men, as they could also tell, and had started to move out of the way. Before they could do so completely, the reactor went critical. The human dreadnought had been too slow, and was largely caught in the blast, critically damaging it. The cruisers, however, were luckier and suffered only medium damage. Wilters demanded an answer from me, but I told him I had not told them to do such a thing, since, if I had, it would have been a fleet-wide act, not just. He accepted the situation of the hulls fell to earth. Wilters escape using warp. He merely chuckled and didn't answer. He was a smart man and didn't want to risk the method getting out, even if our escape was improbable. If we had found this out back then, it very well could be changed the course of the war. I will openly admit my understanding of the following subject is pretty limited. I very well may have things completely wrong, even if I understand the overall effect. Understand it better. Search. War that human naturally occurring particle they called Heartman. Or they interact with a way that they could, in theory, disrupt the situation of them. They are usually so thinly concentrated that their interaction with space is unnoticed. Due to this, they generally have no real effect on warp travel, which of course relies on essentially around it to mass that restricts to below the speed of light. As I said, however, in great enough concentration, they could disrupt space-time, and so interfere with the warp drive's ability to bend space-time, thus rendering warp travel impossible. The humans had found a way to collect these particles in a special form of containment that allowed a vessel carrying them to still use warp travel. Since before the war, they had been collecting these particles and had enough of them a way to prevent warp travel within a certain area. After they'd been used, they could be recollected for future use and to re-enable warp travel in that area. It has been questioned how the wider galaxy had not discovered these particles sooner, and how the humans had been able to hide their discovery and collection of them. I cannot speak for the former. Maybe it was because warp travel environment. However, the answer is simple. They lied. They disguised shipments of Hartmann particles by labeling them as, and saying they were, other things. Other scientific materials, pigs. They deemed was the right moment. With time, there's a part of the ships of the home fleet. While we were pushing through their lines, they used their maneuvering to stay in front as a cover for pouring them out across the battlefield. It was like a bear right unable to escape. All line that to fleet eventually and had to go as it expected us attack, knew where it would come from, and what its target would be. It would fight. The intervention of the Fifth Fleet had not been planned in the home fleet day. and that this moon us in the exercises. Even though they hadn't been ordered and it's attacking the native men battle, I'm glad I didn't know immediately after it. And what pained me after the war to learn was that in less than a day, the Fifth Fleet had been planned to be redeployed in preparation for Star Cluster 76GN. Had I just waited one more day, it's unlikely they would have been able to arrive at Earth in time to prevent us from bombarding something. As I was saying, to Cairo us as prisoners to give us again aiming to destroy. The tomb of Cyrus was an amazing sight. I knew this even before the war, as I had done a major landmark. It was a massive structure, built like everything before, constructed in such a planet built it. It curved up its piles. It was to symbolize that the earth itself mourned his death and desired to protect his body. Considering the importance we would later find Cyrus, the first and only emperor of mankind, had for their current state, it is fitting. As the sight of the tomb loomed in the window, I turned to Admiral Wilson. How could humans have been so ready for an escape when their last one had been waged by their warlike and yet so peaceful and forgiving? He looked at me, and what he said next, be able to forget. We humans have a section one of a practically extinct language bellum. In one piece, prepare for. Look at him in silence. The revelation that humanity hadn't just been preparing for war for a few months, but really had been doing so since their last one wasn't much use to me now.